I wanted to talk more about the situation in the inter-American system and the problem of that we're facing today in inter-American relations, in which some of these issues are going to necessarily appear. But one of them is one that concerns one of the work I was talking about. I mean, there's a new nationalism in Latin America, and I think that comes very much with economic development. I mean, what has happened in the past 10, 15 years, I would say mainly in the decade between 2012 and 2002, or the beginning of the century, and 2012, and even including the crisis of 2008 and 9, is that the region has developed enormously and has grown very strongly, has grown at a fast pace. I am probably talking more here about South America than about Central America and the Caribbean. Mexico has been very uneven in those years. But in general, I would say that if you take Latin America, the figure here, the aggregate figures are always dangerous to use, but I will use them. I mean, this is a continent that passed from in 12 years from a GMP. Its share of the world economy grew from a little bit over 5% to 8% of the world economy, and that was something that hadn't happened in our region since the years before the Great Depression of the 20s. That happened in the south of Latin America at the end of the 80s, the 19th century, beginning of the 20s. It happened now. And that's something that has to be taken care of. I mean, it has to be considered. If you talk about Latin America today, Latin America is not the same size economy it was a few decades ago. It's a 6 trillion economy, still a little bit less than a little bit more than one third of the U.S. economy, by the way. So we still are very, very much behind, but in which actually some countries have grown at a very, very large base. If you take, for example, countries such as Panama or the Dominican Republic, which have grown in some cases in some consecutive years been two-digit sizes of growth. That means that in a decade that Peru, that economy is twice as much or more than twice as much what it was some years ago. In the case of Chile, with the most sustained growth, even not the strongest every year, but the most sustained, the Chilean economy is today 3 times what it was in 1990 when the democracy returned to Chile. Almost 3 times as much. So that has been a big change, and also a change in society. And today, the rates of poverty have declined. We had a tremendous, in the bad years of the 80s and the 90s, poverty grew a lot in Latin America. It grew over even 40% at some point. So now it's still big. It's still around 26%, but that's a big improvement. And of course, that done in the period of democracy is also something that's very, very interesting to examine. And this was not a product of the dictatorships, on the contrary. It's not the product. The product of the dictatorships were for other reasons, but that has nothing to do with politics. It had to do with the economic trends of the time. The so-called neoliberal policies brought Latin America a decade of stagnation, and that can be certified. And that's why when you hear Latin Americans, which are very prone to speak with stereotypes. I mean, the consensus of the Washington consensus. We hear them talk so bad about that. I mean, that has a material basis to say in some way we did very bad in those years, except a couple of countries, except a very, very small couple of countries, a group of countries. The rest did very bad in those times. So compared to that, the first decade of the 2000s was great, and it was I would say a virtuous decade of democracy, economic growth, and some not enough, but some social improvement to a larger degree. Well, I should say just in a few words that I think that that decade is partly over, with some successes and some failures. We are facing a period of less economic growth than before. We are still burdened with a large number of poor and a high degree of inequality and discrimination, and we still have a lot to learn and to work on in matters of economic growth. The only fear is that what happened, as I was mentioning, in the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century, in which, as you know, one country of South America, Argentina, was the 7th economy in the world. And by the way, my country, which was more or less the same size in population at that time, was about half of that, which is really a big growth. And then when the market for commodities fell and everybody was started to fall down, and the big economies in the north fell into crisis, those countries fell into a crisis of which they never really recovered completely. So that fear is there, not that much. I mean, by financial systems are better, diversification of production is a little bit larger. We have stronger economies. We have people who can manage the economies. It's not but we are going to grow less. And growing less, probably we are going to have more social upheaval than we had before. But I want to leave that aside just to say that the big issue here is how that coincides, how that reflects itself in the situation in the American system, in the Inter-American system. And being the Secretary General of the largest and most important organization in the Inter-American system, politically at least.
Well, you're dealing with leaders, with people. Could you talk a little bit about this new crop of
I will go.
Interesting personalities that have suddenly.
Well, I will go into that. But just let me finish with this. And I will say that the system is. The Inter-American system has existed for over 100 years, but it has not always been the same. And what's going on now has happened before. I was working the other day in a book that I'm going to publish with my writings on the United States and Latin America in the 80s, and I wrote another one in the 80s. And in those years, we had something similar to what we have now. We had today we have the UNASUR. Then we had the Rio Group, the group of eight. The group of eight. Today we have the CELAC, and then we had, it still is there, it still exists, something that functions, some kind of a ghost institution that functions in Caracas. Not because of the present government, it's been before, it's been there for several years, called the CELA, the Economic System of Latin America. We had a little bit before that, we had the CECLAC of Viña del Mar, the demands for a new economic relation with the United States, etc. So why is it that today the economic, the political system of the Americas seems so disorderly? I just wrote this. I mean, we have, of course, you can describe it formally, and it's more or less reasonable. It's the OAS. All the organizations of the Inter-American system, which are to a certain extent originated by the OAS, the Inter-American Development Bank, the Pan-American Health Organization, the Inter-American Institute for Agricultural Cooperation, IICA. To some extent, ECLAC, CEPAL, which is the United Nations, but it's very much a Latin American institution, and some others who have already been absorbed, reformed, etc., etc. So and then we have, of course, the regional ones, which is very natural that they exist. I mean, everybody was a little bit concerned about the emergence of something called the UNASUR. But nobody seemed to be that concerned when the American system of the Sistema Interamericano, Sistema de Integración Centroamericano, the Inter-American Central American system, the SICA, was created a few years ago, and before that the CARICOM, and before the CIECA and all that. we've always had integration mechanisms, always. So that shouldn't be of a concern. And as for something that is probably to some extent new, which is the CELAC, well, actually, let me tell you one thing. I mean, yesterday, 2 days ago, a few members of the OAS, which are probably the ones you can imagine, raised their hands in the Council of the OAS to talk about Gaza. They wanted to talk about Gaza. They wanted to discuss with the members of what was going on in the Middle East. But nobody from North America paid any attention to that. Nobody really cared about that. So it's only natural that if you want to join the discussion in a coordinated way, the discussion on world affairs, you create some organization. It's always existed in the United Nations, so it's not rare either. What is rare is the ideas that go behind, that are behind that notion, which are very much similar to the ones that appeared in the 80s or the 70s and the 80s I was referring to about. I mean, it was new about the UNASUR, the community of Caribbean states, the CECLA, the ECLAC and others, is the idea that we need new institutions for Latin America. And the attempts to challenge the inter-American system. Now, I have said very recently, so I will just repeat it again, this is not a problem of the Latin Americans only. If you go to the OAS, to any meeting of the OAS today, for example, or to any, this can be reproduced at other levels with ministers of the going to the IDB meetings, or going to the meetings of the Inter-American Institute on Agricultural Cooperation, or anywhere, you will find the ministers. You will find the ministers. If you go to the meetings of the Council of the OAS, you will find ambassadors who come and go. The present foreign minister of Haiti was an ambassador to the OAS until very recently. The present ambassador to the OAS of Peru is the former prime minister. The past ambassador of Peru is the present minister of the Interior in this country. The ambassador of Argentina was just minister of Defense and for Public Security. So it seems that they're very relevant people in their countries, as always happened in the case of embassies. And some are going up, some are going down. That's very clear. I mean, some are there to render services, and others are there for services rendered, as a friend of mine once said. But they are all important people, except one delegation, which is not there usually. And that is a problem, because the Inter-American system, there was it is expected still now from the Inter-American system. And I would say that the problem is when you set a certain standard, when you propose a certain standard, you expect for it to be covered some way. I mean, after all, it was the president of the United States who went to the summit of Trinidad and Tobago in 2009? I think 9. When he took office, it was 9? No, it was 10, excuse me. 2009. And made a very clear statement that everybody remembers. Maybe the speech writers don't remember it, but the people who heard it remember it. I want to make policy with you and not for you. And there are issues for policy. I'm not talking about a big policy, not talking about the big stick, not the New Deal, not the Alliance for Progress, or any of that. But we have a big migration problem at this moment. We have a big crime problem. We are concerned about the issues of human rights and democracy in the region. But the magic of the Inter-American system is that it's always been properly inclusive of everybody. So, and some of them are not there anymore. We don't have any policies. I mean, I'm not talking about good policies or bad policies. I'm not talking now about policies for us or with us. But we still don't know where to stand. I mean, the fact that the other day the Vice President of the U.S. was in Honduras, and he met with the Central American leaders to discuss the issue of migration, which was a good thing. It was a good thing for the first time. It was the first time. We created a Department of Migration of the OAS about 3 years ago for the first time. And the issues of crime are still dealt with on a bilateral basis I mean, I think that there is a big lack of a policy or of a Latin American policy of this country, and that is the most important problem in the Inter-American system. And I was referring to something I went to publish about my works in the 1980s, and it was exactly that. I mean, why do these institutions grow? Because things are happening in the region, and the OAS is not sufficient because the U.S. is not there. So I think that we do have a problem there. I think that we have material for an agenda today, a very powerful agenda between the region and Latin America, and within the U.S. and Latin America. This is a continent which is going to be a 1 billion people continent in a few years. 2/3 of that population is in Latin America, and the Caribbean, which is very small in that sense. 1/3 is in North America, however, it's here. This country, I mean, we're much more than ever more integrated in population terms. This country is the 3rd Latin country in the world, the U.S. After Brazil and Mexico. No other country has more Latin population than the United States. The 3rd, which is in the north, is 3 times as big as the 3rd, which is in the south, which is also a dimension which is very necessary. We continue to be excellent trade partners, very good trade partners. Actually, I would say that the deficit of Latin America, the surplus of Latin America with regards to the OAS, has mostly to do with the Mexican exchange, but basically the other countries are big buyers from. I mean, are the best economic partners of the U.S. except Europe, the largest size, and very, very balanced size. We have a lot of cultural links also, not only population links. We have a lot of problems together. We face a lot of problems together. We could have a much more integrated energy market now that the U.S. is really moving very strongly in matters of energy. And we don't have policies. We don't have common policies. Not for us, nor much less with us, which I think is a big problem, the big challenge of Latin America, of hemispheric relations today. And I must repeat, of course, they say very bad things, but they are still here. I mean, the one thing that the leaders, as you say, which I would say fairly special people, because except for Venezuela, we can talk about Venezuela aside if somebody wants to talk about Venezuela. If you look at the other members of the group, which are Ecuador, Nicaragua, Bolivia, they're big, I was reasonably successful from my economic point of view, and very much eager to bring their things to the Inter-American system anytime that is necessary. I mean, even to contest it, even to discuss with it. The other day, we had a discussion on Argentina that was very illustrative, because actually everybody had made statements about the problem of the Argentinian debt, everybody, which had appeared in about 2 or 3 papers in the world. When it happens at the OAS, it happens all over the world. And they know that. They know that this is the place to be and this is the place to talk about. But we still need somebody else to talk to. I mean, the magic of the Inter-American system is the linkage between the North and the South. If only the South is there, even if it's complaining, but complaining at a very high level, but the North is not there, then the South will then necessarily to make all these kinds of organizations to use to supplement the need for some kind of. Remember that most of these are small countries, to which the tool of bilateral relations is not that much that interesting. I mean, most of these countries can participate meaningfully in the world society if they are together, if they join together. If not, only 2 or 3 will be able to make and probably Mexico and Brazil will be able to be relevant partners in the world if they are not all together. So I think that's more or less what I wanted to talk to you about that. I mean, the need for a hemispheric policy that hopefully will be done, as the president once said 5 years ago, with us, all of us together, but at least clear clues on where this country wants to go in its relations with the hemisphere. I don't want to be. I don't want to talk bad about anybody, but we did have the Inter-American Commission of Women was one of the oldest units inside the OAS. Actually, it comes from the years in which the OAS was called Pan American Union. But I see that very much the case, very much. And in the past, I would say when I came to the OAS, it was dedicated mainly to only one issue, which was violence against women. The Convention of Belém do Pará had just been already ratified by most states, and they worked very strongly in that, linked with the civil society and all that. We decided, I decided for my second term that there was a need for a broader policy on the issues of women. This is a good example of what I was saying. We had meetings of all kinds of units in the region dealing with the issue of women. I mean, the UN was very strongly there, and the regional ones were strongly there, and we were usually invited as observers. Well, we made a big effort. We appointed a new secretary of the commission, a Mexican ambassador, Mrs. Carmen Moreno. And today I would say we are again the first women organization in the region. I mean, where everybody counts, where the ministers do meet. We deal with policies on three grounds. One is the issue of violence. This is the 20th anniversary of the Convention of Belém do Pará. We have celebrated it very strongly. I was at a meeting in Mexico with about 2,000 women in the forum on the issue of violence against women. We have improved very much our quality for observation and for implementation of the Commission. Most of the countries have not only ratified the Convention, which is something that's not always done, but it's the easier part, but changed their laws to include the issue of women. We are very much bent on the matter of including violence against women as one specific category in the crime scales. Before it was classified in general as homicide or as lesiones, as we say, and we never knew how much the violence was. The results have been good, at least from the point of view of knowing the problem, not ignoring the problem. Our second area has to do with economic with the discrimination of women as an economic point of view. We still have a very, I would say, a very different situation among countries, of course. But in general, I would say that the women unemployment is higher than I'm talking about women in the labor market. Of course, if you take it as a whole, about half of the women in the region work, and in some countries, such as mine, for example, it's less than 40%. And the unemployment, but even in those sectors, unemployment is quite high. I mean, the number of women looking for jobs are still much larger than men. And then there's the issue of wages. I mean, we have quite a lot of evidence that at least women are paid at least 1/3 less than men in general. So we're working very hard on that. And then it's also women in politics. I mean, because actually, I mean, women in public office or in office. And this, I mean, I must admit that in this we have a flaw. I have challenged the heads of the commission very much on this matter, saying this is not just a problem of public office. Yes, we are working on public office. Some countries have to have laws of anti-discrimination, laws of affirmative action and all that. In countries such as I think Costa Rica recently, so some laws were dictated not only on the participation of women, but also on the sizes in which women have to participate, and even with some provisions I understand for ¿cómo se llama? What do you say? Alternancia, for alternance in places. No, alternancia. I mean,
alternate.
To alternate the positions for women and men and all that, but we're still very uneven on that too. I mean, the number of women in Congress are still not satisfactory number. Of course, I must admit that in these matters there's more discussion, there's more debate. Whether it should be done, it should not be done. Some people feel that it's not proper to regulate too much this participation, but that's something we have worked very strongly. But of course, there's the other part, and I usually tell it with an example. I always recall when I was a foreign minister of Chile, and we were visiting Italy, and we had a meeting with the foreign minister. The foreign minister was Mrs. Susana Agnelli, who is the woman of the clan of the owners of the Fiat Corporation. No?
Agnelli.
And our president said some very nice words to her. You have had such a distinguished public career and all that. And she said, yes, I've been a foreign minister twice. I've been an undersecretary, I've been a senator, I've been a congresswoman, and I've been ambassador of my country to several. Of course, I should have mentioned that I started as mayor of my town. But of course, my brothers have never invited me to the administration, to the council of the Fiat, to the board of the Fiat. And that happens very much in companies in our region. I would say that if you want to know a place in which really women are clearly more discriminated than any other, is all that has to do with companies and private business. And I must admit that we have not gone that much into that. But we do have a big program, and it's a large priority to us. And we have a very active commission, which is everywhere. That's another matter that we should mention.
Let me ask a question. In terms of some kind of fundamental dissection of U.S.-Latin American relations, and looking upon it not so much from an economic point of view, but from a point of view of a fundamental political split, thinking in terms of the ALBA movement, but an ALBA movement that grows seasoned and perhaps gains additional members. Is there not some sort of real possibility that the ideological phase of U.S. relations with Latin America isn't really quite over, and that the United States would be prepared to thwart any effort on the part of a drift to the left that might take place in the region?
Well, I think that yes, of course, I do believe that there's an ideological factor here that's very well exploited and very well worked with. It's in Latin America, usually the ideological component of some external enemy has been very much a company of nationalism, which is precisely what Silbert warns about in the book I was talking with about. I mean, the nationalism is good. It's a positive force, in as much as countries feel that the process of development is very much something which should be faced by the nation as a whole, and not by just some of the components. But also, nationalism is a danger in which, when it includes populism and ideological rifts and all that.
And when Brazil loses the...
But that's another time of that's yeah, well, I was going to say something about that. It was a more lighter side, but today that's very much very much used in Latin America. For example, an ambassador of the OAS on the almost already famous game between Brazil and Germany, tweets, "What a shame for Brazil, for the UNASUR, y para la patria grande." Which is actually, I would say, I'm not sure that I would ever read that if the Germans lost the World Championship. I mean, but really, I mean, every uses tool this to present something that's important, new, which is a new Latin American nationalism, but still new in the sense that it carries other factors. Now it's not a socialist project or something like that. In that sense, it's not ideological, but it's ideological in the sense that it still uses the idea of your enemies. I mean, we have to be together because, as a writer I think it was a Peruvian writer who El mundo es ancho y ajeno. You read that book? It's I forgot the name now. ¿Cómo se llama? It was a Peruvian author who has a novel with that. The world is wide and it's alien. It's not ours. And that, I think that's very much present. That's very much present, especially in the South. Huh? No, especially in the South. I mean, you don't find that in Mexico you find some good old mistrust of the United States, because actually when you live with such a big country beside you, you have to be mistrustful. You should never be too... In fact, in Latin America, there's a Latin barometer poll about 4 years ago that shows that when countries are asked who the U.S. should be associated with, Ciro Alegría. No, sí, creo que sí, no. We should be associated with the U.S. Every country except Venezuela says, with which country you should have a free trade agreement. Every country except Venezuela says with the United States.
Do you think
the United States, Venezuela is very simple because they do have a free trade agreement with the United States. I mean, they sell the U.S. all the oil that they're producing. So really, the problem is not there's not a necessity.
Do you think that Venezuela understands you?
Well, I think Venezuela has a big problem now, in the sense that the economy is falling. I mean, that's a big problem in Venezuela. It's not an ideological problem. We can be presented for an ideological problem for so much time. But certainly they are in a different ideology. I mean, there's at least part of the Venezuelan government is very much in an ideological line, as the one you were referring to, and they are not able to find the common ground. Can I put you just one example in all this, and it's very easy. For example, in Chile, the president of Chile, the President Bachelet, presented a few months ago, a tax reform. It was very strong tax reform. It's not that much money, but it's meant on financing, I would say, a big push in some of the social areas, and it does go to where it should go. I mean, the poor, the rich are going to pay more, and there are going to be less loopholes. But as usual, things get entangled because I mean, when you are going to raise taxes, for example, you say to raise taxes on gas. We're going to take, and it's very, the figures are there, they can show you that 85% of the new tax is going to be paid by the upper classes. That's a fact, 90% maybe. But then they will always find an old lady who has a car and raises her 4 children with this car and will be affected by the raising the taxes, and that's who they're going to put on television. That's a fact. So it was heavy because the discussion became very hard. The different taxes were discussed. If you read the polls, things began to get even. At the beginning, everybody was much in favor of the tax raise, but it began to get even, and we had a problem. But we had the votes in Congress to get a tax raise. I mean, if you took it to Congress and voted, there would be a tax raise, and with the prerogatives of the heads of the Congress, the House and the Senate, they can bring it to Congress. They bring it to vote on the same day. So what do? They met with the opposition. They discussed all the difficulties, and they signed the protocol to agree on the tax reform unanimously, while keeping most of the taxes standing. I mean, that's exactly on the other side with the Venezuelan negotiations. The Venezuelan dialogue, they sat on a chair, and they said a lot of things between them. And the opposition made a concession. They treated President Maduro as President Maduro. They had never done that. They went to meet him to say, Mr. President, etc., etc. They spoke about 40, 50, 60 people that they had in jail, which they felt were wrongly in jail. And they asked for one. Mr. Simunovic. Mr. Simunovic was ill, and everybody feels it's about time to release him. But there was no release of Mr. Simunovic. There was not even one concession. So the ministers that were mediating in the dialogue have lost all interest in that. And the Vatican, well, everybody talks about the Vatican, and the Vatican, well, I spoke to the Vatican too, and they said, no, yes, we're going to help in that, if we feel that we are going to get some success. Because if there's not going to be no success, there's no reason to mediate if you don't have some perspective of succeeding. So they lost the opportunity of the dialogue, and they have to reopen it again. Of course, the problems are not, the violence is not as much as it was before. I mean, I'm talking political violence. Criminal violence is tremendous. But things, I mean, could go on for 2, 3, 4 months. Now the problem is more internal because President Maduro understands the need to have some reforms. And but that won't last for long. I think that the crisis is coming in Venezuela. Do they understand that? No. I don't think that. I think that the opposition, I mean, that in the government, about half of the government forces feel that that this crisis is going to be an opportunity to get stronger in their policies. And there's very little dialogue, so the country is every time more fragmented. I don't think that's a good forecast for Venezuela, but I think that's the real forecast.
I wonder if you could discuss the significance of the Ecuadorian proposal to reform the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights and the ultimate acceptance of a diluted version of it.
Well, I very much agree with some of. I mean, well, first I think the Venezuelans have had a problem with the. I mean, the Ecuadorians have had a problem with the rapporteur on freedom of expression. Probably that had never. I mean, if the problem of the Inter-American Commission and the rapporteur of freedom of expression with Ecuador had not happened, they wouldn't have cared less about. They couldn't have cared less about it. They have no other relevant pending cases than the ones having to do with freedom of expression. But some of the things that are said in the debate, I very much share. If you read my inaugural speeches of the Commission on Human Rights in the first years of my in office, I always have said that the weaknesses of the Commission are basically two. One is economic. We don't have enough money for all the cases and problems that get to the Commission. And second, we are not, I mean, the Inter-American system is not complete, not universal, as they say. In two senses, at least in two senses. One, not every country has signed the Convention on Human Rights. Not every country has ratified the conventions. Some have not signed it, by the way. Canada has never signed it. The US has signed it. It's not ratified it, but they signed it. So there's one first invention that they say that it's not bound by the Commission. No, yes, it's bound by the Commission. The US is bound by the Commission, by the convention. It was approved as a statement in the OAS assembly by all the member countries. So it's mandatory for every country, except in those cases in which it needs ratification. And the case in which it needs ratification is the Court of Human Rights. So the OAS is not, the Human Rights Commission is not universal in the sense that not all the countries belong to the court, and that's a bad thing. I agree with that. Now, I don't think it's a good idea. To fight or to promote to fight against this weakness of the system by separating the system between the ones who have ratified and the ones who have not ratified. I think it's useless. What you have to do is to work with them to try to have a ratification. But if you exclude from the debate those who are the ones that, let's assume that we have a problem here, that the three of us have a problem. Now, the worst way to solve that is to exclude us from the discussion. I mean, what are you going to discuss among those that are already members of the Commission or the Court of Human Rights? The countries that have ratified the convention, well, they already ratified it. So what kind of a process are you going to carry out, excluding the ones that have not ratified it? And that, I think, to be very frank, I think that hides an attempt to weaken the system. I've been accused several times of being against the system, by the way, because I've said that the system should not work the same with democracies than with dictatorships, and that they should understand that the governments they're dealing with are not military governments, they are democratic governments, and that they should engage more in the dialogue with the system. That many of the procedures on the Commission on Human Rights have been inherited from times in which you dealt with the Pinochets and the Videlas, and therefore the best thing you could do was sit the government on one side and the accusers on the other one and have them kicked around for a while. That's not working in the Commission. So we have changed that. We have changed that the procedures, we have changed that the system, we changed the persons in charge. But another thing is we'll try to weaken the Commission. This process of getting together as many times as possible the parties of the Commission on Human Rights, which is of the Convention on Human Rights, which is what the government of Ecuador is doing, is something I don't share. And well, actually, that was my problem with the foreign minister in the General Assembly of the OAS, which was, I would say, quite a problem. Yes. Something else. ¿Me pongo corbata o así nomás? No, así nomás va a estar él aquí, ahí van a estar ellos. Okay. Muy bien.
Yes.
Me tengo que poner de pie. No. She said that we're going to get the prize now. Then we continue talking later.
Oh, yes.
What's it?
Weren't we supposed to announce it?
Yes.
Well, why don't you announce it? Okay.
Well, announce.
Jose Miguel, the Board of Trustees is pleased to inform you that you've been made a recipient of the Council for Hemispheric Affairs Calman H. Silvert Award in honor of your lifetime commitment to inter-American affairs and in particular to your belief that each member of the OAS is equal in its legitimacy, merit, and standing.
Thank you very much.
You know what I'm trying to do there.
I want to say something about that.
Mr. Prince, how about you? Mr. Prince?
Do you get enough or not?
Shake his hand, Mr.
Are you going to do it or not?
Oh, do what?
Hand him the award. Here, Mr.
Okay. Thank you very much. Huh? Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Pleasure.
And thank you so much.
Well, I should say something about that. Because
¿Sí se puede dar vuelta para la foto?
para la foto ya sí, por favor, sí, claro que sí. Claro que sí. Are you getting up again or not? Okay.
We can win the baseball game.
I know.
You only hit the ball
I'm
occasionally.
reminded of the moment in my very. I mean, when Paul McCartney went to Chile once, we sang at the National Stadium, and the Minister of Education, which was of my generation, decided that we even decorate him for his cultural achievements and all that. And there was a nice ceremony. It was done in the inside room of the stadium. Well, the only problem was that McCartney was accompanied at that time with Linda Eastman, because his wife was quite a tall woman. And the photograph is Paul McCartney receiving the prize and his wife like this on top of the window.
Why are you telling me this story?
Okay. I will say one thing about this. Thank you very much. And I have tried very hard to do exactly what you read, to make every country feel that they are part of the OAS. And even though some countries say that we have to change everything, that we have to move to the CELAC as the OAS, they talk about an OAS without the US and Canada, they are all there. And I think that they are there because every time they have a problem, their problem is taken care of. You were talking, for example, about Ecuador. Ecuador's president is the most vocal proponent of a different organization. But when they had the problem with Mr. Assange in the embassy in London, and the British government did make the mistake of threatening them with going inside the embassy to pick up Mr. Assange, we had a special meeting of ministers of that, and we condemned that. And when President Morales' plane was intercepted in Europe, again we came up for them, and we usually come up for every country that really has some kind of a problem, if the members agree, of course. I would have wanted the Venezuelan issue to be discussed much more inside in the OAS, but if the countries don't agree, you can't do that. So I would say that in general, yes, our philosophy should be, the big change in the inter-American system that has to be understood, that it's not now this pretension of equality, the demand for equality is very strong in the Latin American countries. Of course, we are not equal. On the contrary, countries in the region are so different, are so varied in size, in economy, in culture, in everything, that it's very difficult to say that we're all the same. I said once here, I will repeat it again, 7 countries of the OAS, let's put it in 9. 9 countries of the OAS pay 97.5% of the budget. So we are not objectively equal, but every country was to be treated with the respect that the countries are owed to. Of course, this is more difficult when we have ideological differences, or we have political differences. But if you're going to have to have a inclusive organization, you have to accept that. everybody remains very well, and I very much work a lot in the Inter-American Democratic Charter, and that commits the countries to democracy, and that's true. That's necessary. But the charter of the OAS says that every country, every independent country in the Americas that signs the charter is a member. And that's also something you have to take care of. I mean, of course, sometimes the two things do not coincide. And if I had to say something about my tenure in the OAS, I would say it has been marked by that. We have never had more differences, and we have never had more participation at the Organization of American States, which is quite a good thing. So thank you very much for this prize.
Thank you.
And now we're going to go on discussing it.
One thing you should know is that this thing was carved out of the rudder of the Huáscar.
Huh?
Yes, yes. And the rest of the Huáscar will soon follow.
Well, yeah, that's a fact. The problem with the Huáscar is that the time to return it is long past. I think from a political point of view, it's long past. I mean, and the return of several other things is also long past. But then to take the Huáscar from Talcahuano to the Callao would be a major prodigy of science.
Well, I actually wrote a draft of something, and I put in the draft, it said that I've been here through 50 years of Secretary Generals, and I've eaten, when they had their townhouse, I used to eat there with one bribe session, a semester, a term, so forth. But although I didn't quite make the, I actually probably don't have the Brownstone facility, but I just want you to know that I have always thought you to be a breathtakingly bright man.
Thank you very much.
And that the one guy that I would go to here to speak, because I've given up that business. But if your name's there, I go.
Well, thank you very much. And I assume that most of the young people that are here are working and are interested in politics and all that. If you ever get involved in that, I suggest that you enjoy it as much as possible. I mean, the one thing I cannot stand is the people that say, no, I took upon this burden on me, I could be doing something else. I have neglected my family and my friends, and I could have made much more money, etc. Well, this is a voluntary matter. If they want to be there, they should enjoy it. And I enjoyed every minute of it. And thank you very much for this.
Thank you.
Man, thank you.